After playing Assassin's Creed Shadows for about 60 hours, I think I've spent enough time playing through what the game has to offer to give a fair as possible thoughts and a reasonable review for the game. Before we get into the review, however, I would like to tell you all so far how my experience went, just so you know what to expect and from what perspective all of my thoughts, impressions, and criticisms are coming from. I primarily played this game as the stealth centric character Naoe, as someone who absolutely loves stealth games like Metal Gear Solid, Splinter Cell. Now you know my bias, and most of the focus of my perspective will also be from a stealth game perspective. I primarily played with English voiceovers since this is what it's set to by default and how I experience most of the games that I play. I always want to see how English voiceovers perform in games nowadays because they have been getting better. And of course, I did try out the Japanese voiceovers for a while. I did not 100% the entire game, so I did not complete all the collectibles, the side activities, but I did do a chunk of post-game content, side quests, some companion quests, other faction quests. So there may be a few things that other people have missed, or things that I have missed, but other people have done. Now, most of my playtime was spent in the hardest difficulty for both combat and exploration, and I also did not turn on instant assassinations. Now, I know that assassinations not being guaranteed or instant is very odd for an Assassin's Creed game, but my reasoning for this is because by default it is off. So that means that, from my understanding, the game was designed with no instant assassinations until you built up your character, and I wanted my experience to align as much as possible with what most people will go through. Of course, one of the biggest deviations for sure will be from the heads-up display, the HUD, which I will explain later. First off, the good. Something I think definitely deserves praise is how the game looks. Like, not just because it's 2025, right? Most games, be it AAA, AA, indie, they should look good, definitely, from compared to games that came before. But also because of the color palette and overall design of not just the characters but the landscape, compared to previous Assassin's Creed games, is actually really good to look at. Be it in any of the four seasons, the game looks particularly very nice to look at. To compare it with previous games like Odyssey and Valhalla, again, this is mostly personal and subjective, but I felt that at some points the color was too saturated and painful to look at, and sometimes it was flat for those games. But here there was a perfect balance, and I have to say the lighting definitely did a lot of the heavy lifting for the overall visual presentation of the game. To compare it to another game that takes place in the same country, Japan, different area, different time period, Ghost of Tsushima for me is practically the golden standard for visual presentation in a game set in Japan. It by far for me it's the best looking one. And Assassin's Creed Shadows did a very decent attempt to try and capture the vibe and the success of the visual presentation that Ghost of Tsushima had. As for the English voiceovers, they are okay for the most part. I do feel, however, several times, be it NPCs, main characters, companions, story, quest NPCs, they needed either better directions or multiple takes. Assassin's Creed Shadows really did well in designing the Four Seasons feature of the game as Naoe. Now, I say Naoe because I feel that because these seasons heavily impact stealth gameplay in particular, I feel that the action-centric character Yasuke practically ignores and is not affected at all by whatever season he does his missions or infiltrations at. Naue, however, really needs to adapt. During winter, in particular, icicles form, and now traversing ledges or roof now has a downside. You may cause these icicles to fall, alerting enemies to your presence. On top of that, ponds and bodies of water freeze up, making a nice hidden traversal area now inaccessible. During fall, rains are plentiful, meaning visibility is not on your side, neither is it on the enemy's side. The opposite is during spring and summer, where general weather is very good, very fair, which means spotting enemies is easier for you, but that also means you are easier to spot, especially if you are not infiltrating at night. As for the execution of this, I will talk more about it later. Now, I played mostly Naue, but I would like to take a moment to talk about Yasuke's playstyle for a bit. Now, from the beginning, the game really reminds you that Yasuke's general playstyle ditches stealth for straight-up action. Yasuke is not sneaky at all. He easily towers over every single enemy in the game, and even his footsteps are significantly louder than Naue's, which is a very nice touch in the sound department. Now, the kick move is ridiculously fun to use, never gets old. Plenty of his abilities are pretty satisfying and cool to use. My personal favorite is Samurai Showdown because he really nails the Ronin / Yojimbo vibe with the pose that he does. Now, as for Naue, if there is one expectation I had coming into her playstyle, hilariously and oddly enough, it's not the classic Assassin's Creed game style of stealth. Because of the whole ninja theming, and of course because the game is set in Japan, Tenchu is the game that came to mind, one of my favorite stealth games of all time. Using tools, grappling on rooftops, hiding in the shadows before assassinating targets and enemies was what I was thinking and expecting when I controlled Naue. And Naue's very small frame makes it more believable that enemies don't see her, but especially in the highest difficulty, Naue cannot just breeze through and not expect an enemy you did not tag or see to not see her. They are pretty smart at spotting Naue on rooftops and from a distance. I did not use Eagle Vision except for finding the last daisho in a castle so I can loot the chest in the castle, which was very frustrating finding that last daisho. And I removed the element in the UI for tagging so that I have to manually keep track of my enemies and really keep my head on a swivel and triple checking all angles before I move from one point to another. This is again a consequence of my bias towards Tenchu and other stealth games. And if I get caught, the game definitely did a very good job of implementing a stealth design called disempowerment. Shoutouts to Nakey Jakey. That is how I learned of that term. It really makes me feel the consequence of playing a stealth-centric character and getting caught. I easily got overwhelmed. I die in like 2 or 3 hits, and enemies take way more hits to kill as Naue compared to like Yasuke, who can eliminate even elite and armored targets a lot easier than Naue. Speaking of equipment, I absolutely love how customizable they are as cosmetics. Being able to mix and match clothing, just disclaimer of course, just the armor and the headgear is the only one you can mix and match. You cannot fix the top or the pants or the gloves or the shoes, unfortunately, or the footwear. Where they did go in depth with customization, however, is the weapon customization. It is absolute bonkers. From the blade, the handguard, the sheath, the handle, you can really make a weapon yours. All you need to do is to have acquired a weapon. After you sell or recycle them, you can still use the cosmetics that they provide. Now, the story itself has 3 main focuses. The Shinbakufu, which is essentially the big bad and your primary targets. And then you have Naue and Yasuke's own personal campaign as well. Minor spoiler alert. Naue's quest line revolves around the general organization of the assassins, right? And her family's involvement in it. And Yasuke's revolves generally around his own personal interaction with the Templars, essentially. And Naoe and Yasuke's story beats progress as you do their stories, and as you progress the Shinbakufu campaign, you will also progress the phase in their campaigns. So after killing maybe the first one or two targets, you will start Naoe and Yasuke's personal campaigns. And then when you reach a story beat for their campaigns, you have to progress through the Shinbakufu campaign to unlock the next phase of Naoe and Yasuke's storyline. Now, what you can do, you can primarily just focus on the Shinbakufu campaign and then move on with Naoe and Yasuke's campaigns. But I believe you are going to miss out on a couple of skills and really nice looking armor and weapons. So I highly recommend that you do those side by side. Progress Naoe and Yasuke's storylines first as much as you can, and then the Shinbakufu campaign. But of course, you are free to progress however you want and however the game allows you to. And of course, to emphasize a bit, Yasuke's campaign revolves, like I said, around him finding a purpose, a drive in a new land, Japan, as an outsider, after his brief after the game basically teases and shows you about his backstory. While now his focus is on her taking on a monumental responsibility and fulfilling her promise to her father, which the game does give you a brief lore drop at the start. Each target has about 4 missions or quests to do, which range from gather info from this person and or infiltrate this area, kill this target before you take down the main target. Quite frankly, if the gameplay loop of this wasn't particularly fun to do, I would have bigger problems with this. But because it was fun, I was able to play through it. I would say just about barely. It was genuinely fun to do, but I still wish that they were a bit more creative in handling each of their targets. Now, a few of them can be progressed only as one particular character, but taking down the target usually uses both characters, both Naoe and Yasuke. It rarely happens because most of the time, like I said, you are free. The game really makes you just choose and doesn't it gives you the freedom to tackle any mission as Naoe or Yasuke. But majority of the targets, like I said, it's really up to player choice. And the number of like Yasuke Naoe only missions for the main story, they are quite few. Whenever I was doing these missions, whenever I spot the target, the camera would zoom in and then slow-mo, and it was kind of goofy. I'll say that much. It was very goofy. I would have preferred if there was maybe an opening intro or establishing shot of the target whenever we started the mission. I think that would have been nice. But yeah, like there are some parts of the game where I could say they exerted a lot of effort, and this is one of the areas where I'm like, I think they could have exerted a little bit more effort. So yeah, it is a wacky zoom in. I understand that it's so that your gameplay, right, is not interrupted or the flow of your experience is smooth, but it does feel odd as a design choice. Overall, the game was very enjoyable from start to finish, and while some odd design choices occur here and there, it is a very mostly fun stealth experience. And as for the action, the times that I was forced to play as Yasuke, I also had fun playing as Yasuke. Let's talk about the stuff that stood out in a way I did not like, or things in particular that made me raise an eyebrow, facepalm, or just sigh. Now, starting from the overall visuals and presentations, one thing I must note is definitely that while the facial animations are a big improvement from Star Wars Outlaws, it's a pretty low bar, right? Especially when I have played something like Baldur's Gate 3 that for me still has some of the best motion capture and facial animations in recent years of games. And that's not even a AAA game. I honestly expected a company like Ubisoft, of all things, to really flex like their budget, their talent, and their ability to make more than above average facial animations. Even their previous games like Assassin's, even not just the Ezio trilogy, but even the first Assassin's Creed game had very good facial animations for its time. But like I said, it's a pretty low bar. But I have to call it like, yeah, they did improve. Like the facial animations in Star Wars Outlaws definitely needed a lot of work. It's a step up from that, but like I said, low bar. I mentioned earlier that the design choice of seasons are great. But one thing in particular that makes me scratch my head, right? In a game where shadows is literally in the title, utilizing shadows is a core gameplay for Naue in particular. Why can't I pass time as an option, right? Changing seasons happens naturally as you fast travel, do activities, missions. When you fill up the bar, you have the choice to progress to the next season, or you are forced to progress the next season whenever you finish a mission or fast travel. As for day, afternoon, night, you are at the mercy of time. I know that I could easily just use Yasuke in the day or just sit and wait for night to come as Naue. I think that was the design reason, right? That's why they gave you two characters, right? One character that kind of relies on the shadow of night, and another character that kicks it in the face and just kills everything that moves, right? And I feel like, yeah, I feel like this is a design choice, but again, like, for me, Naue is the assassin in the Assassin's Creed game. Naue has the hidden blade, the assassin's blade. That for me is like bare minimum for what an assassin character in an Assassin's Creed game should be. They must have the hidden blade. It's practically tied to the identity. So yeah, not being able to skip time or pass time is just mildly frustrating. Could be a skill issue, right? I could just sneak better, LMAO. But I just feel like player choice is given in a lot of avenues. And for one of the most important features, which is time, it is not. So yeah, very weird design choice right there and mildly frustrating. Now, as someone who absolutely values music in video games, no matter what genre, no matter what game, if it's AAA, indie, music for me in video games is very important. Unfortunately, this is one area that I was sorely disappointed. I honestly do not know how they decided to make most of these tracks in game, because on one end, some tracks very much fit the game very well, be it when you're in combat, exploring, sneaking around, day, night. They are okay. They're actually pretty good. Unfortunately, there are tracks that overshadow, pun intended, and overwhelm cutscenes, moments, gameplay story beats that do not fit the game at all. Like, I could easily replace a scene with music from Red Dead 2 and it would fit. And I could fit a track from AC Shadows in a Red Dead Redemption 2 cutscene and it would fit. That is how weird it is. Why does it sound almost spaghetti western? What is this? Not gonna lie, Naui's expression is exactly what I have right now. I am confused as heck. Right? Like, there is a difference between like a bad song and a poorly designed or weird song. Like, I personally don't think these tracks are particularly bad. It's not like they sound bad. They just do find weird. It's like if the setting of a location was very somber, right? It's a very somber, peaceful, maybe low-key melancholic area, and then you put like a Mario Party music, like poppy happy track. It's not like the track is bad. No. It just doesn't feel right or doesn't make any sense. That's the whole part of music design, not just in games, but in different forms of media. The right song for the right time. And these BGMs and tracks, in my opinion, like I said, they're not intrinsically bad, but they're just very incongruent with the kind of game I'm playing for a lot of times. As for the writing for general characters in the game, they are fine for the most part. I generally like the dynamic between Yasuke and Naoe and their interactions with other characters in the game. However, there are some dialogue pitfalls in the game which I feel Ubisoft in particular has fallen into, that a lot of games have fallen into as well, which I would like to call incongruent period writing. That is a term I completely made up. If somebody else came up with it, please let me know. And this is when a game's writing feels like it's not meant for the era or setting of the game. In the simplest and crudest metaphor I could possibly give, it's like if a child character in a game like Skyrim or FF16, a medieval setting game, suddenly said skibbity, or if a guard said Riz or lit. Like, you have today's nomenclature of words bleeding into the setting of a game where it was never a thing. There are some dialogues in the game from NPCs, Naoe, even Yasuke, that I feel they would fit in current modern era of conversation. And these lines just do not jive well in the time period that the game is set in.
I'm guessing it's lust?
Lust is a journey
Of 1,000 steps.
that begins with a kiss.
I will only show that much of that clip. Yeah, that is a real thing in the game. I will only show that much of that clip, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective. But this part really just threw me off. Now, these areas I've mentioned in the game that I found myself disappointed in may be missed by some people. Like people who play as Yasuke, so, you know, you're not affected by seasons, so you're not bothered by it. People who skip dialogue and cutscenes, so they won't experience the incongruent writing that I mentioned. And generally, these complaints, criticisms I do not have are not really constantly... these complaints and criticisms I do have are not constantly... Yeah, they're not constantly plaguing my playthrough, but it does come up occasionally and enough for me to point it out, unfortunately. Let's move on to some parts that I did not mention. You might be wondering, like, this is Assassin's Creed, and not once did you mention the parkour. Why? Simply put, my answer is the last game was 5 years ago, Valhalla, and I did not particularly have a memorable experience. So I had practically zero expectations for parkour in this game. I think most people who bought this game kind of have the same expectations, probably no expectations. I think people who did not like the game before it even released probably didn't buy it. People who were already looking forward to it, they are probably the ones that had expectations for this game. But me personally, I did not. I am aware, however, of the comparisons. It's quite viral all over the place. And my opinion really for these comparisons is really convenience versus immersion. Each side has its appeal. People prefer one over the other. It's very tough to find a balance between the two. Because, again, if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. And thing is, with convenience and immersion, both have their merits and deficiencies. So as a comparison, right? As a comparison, some people love the immersive elements of Red Dead 2, from taking time to pick up loot ammo, goodies from, dead cowpokes, gangs, outlaws, skinning game, animals, etc. But some people absolutely hate it to the point that they just end up not hunting animals or not looting. And that is fine. Now, in my honest opinion, it is subjective. It is preference. And in my honest opinion, no one side is better than the other. Each their own, in a sense. There is a fair argument for both. Why this is better or the other one is better. It's, in my honest opinion, there are fair arguments for both. And it really is a preference thing. Now, another thing I did not talk about is performance. I did play on a decent PC that can run other games at 1440p or 2K resolution, 120 FPS easily. But this game does have the same issues that many games on PC, such as FF16, FF7 Rebirth, MH Wilds, has. It has performance hiccups. I crashed maybe twice in my 60 total hours of playtime, but I still wish they never happened. Thankfully, my save data never got corrupted. Everyone on console will generally have the same performance experience. But of course, on PC, that is a different story. Some had no issues, some had nothing but issues. And of course, some like me didn't experience major issues, but they did experience some performance hiccups. It's 2025. PC versions of games shouldn't be this choppy or problematic anymore, especially with years of experience, years of games being ported from console to PC or being released alongside every single platform, especially if it's AAA, because with AAA pricing comes AAA expectations, and I think that is very much fair. Now, of course, I'm very much aware of the huge controversy this game has with Japan, to the point that allegedly, supposedly, the Prime Minister even had to step in and chime in on the whole thing, and that apparently is still ongoing, so that will not be part of this review. Now, before this game came out, I knew that this was Ubisoft's biggest and likely final chance to make a big budget AAA game be actually really good, and not just like Ubisoft good, which is the usual 7 or 8 out of 10 experience, which is not a bad thing. Fortunately, I genuinely think that this game was more than just an above average game. It's a pretty good game for Ubisoft standards. As of the writing of this review, which is during around final week of March, first week of April, Ubisoft was able to avoid a buyout from Tencent, but now made a subsidiary that handles their 3 largest IPs. And Tencent holds about 25% economic interest or stake at the subsidiary, especially after they invested $1.16 billion in the subsidiary. Now, we will probably see some restructuring sometime down the line, whatever form, shape that may be. I think this is beneficial for Ubisoft, but honestly, only time will tell. As a stealth game, this game does a pretty decent job for a stealth experience, but let me remind you again, I played with a very minimal HUD. I played at the hardest exploration and combat difficulty. Keep that in mind. As an action combat game, it is fun, but in the action combat sense, other games have done better, in my honest opinion. I feel like this game would have been better, honestly, with just one character, and more importantly, one genre focus, stealth. I am not exactly a diehard fan of Assassin's Creed games, even though I've played just about most of them. I've played the first one. I've played the Ezio games, except for Revelations, I believe. I played Black Flag, I did play Syndicate and Odyssey, and I generally enjoyed playing all of them, even Valhalla. For the first few hours, I did enjoy Valhalla, but my interest waned the more I played it for several reasons. Now, if you are a die-hard Assassin's Creed fan, you may want to consider picking this up if you prefer a more stealthy experience compared to Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla. And if you did not particularly like how those games up to Mirage played, you may like this one. If you are not an Assassin's Creed game fan and you are looking at this outside from the outside in, and you're like, this looks cool, like you do like a ninja stealth game set in Japan, maybe you enjoyed Ghost of Tsushima and Rise of the Ronin, and you want to get more for your Japanese themed game fix, this is a pretty solid choice, but I would recommend waiting for this game to go on sale instead. It is genuinely fun. The side activities, in my opinion, are not so bloated like previous titles. And hopefully by the time this game goes on sale, post-release content is complete and some of the issues have been ironed out. Now, what the next Assassin's Creed game and other games from Ubisoft will be like, I feel only time will tell. But they can definitely take some elements from this game and carry it over. But I genuinely hope they focus on two particular things for Assassin's Creed. Stick with one protagonist, please. One that focuses on stealth, please. Ditch the RPG armor weapon system. Me personally, if there's one game that they did literally give players the option, hey, if you want to play this like an RPG, like farm for armor, loot, if you don't, you can turn that off literally and just play it the way the previous iterations of this game played it. Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. They actually launched an update for that game because of player feedback. People did not like the RPG elements that they have been doing for just about every game. Everyone knows the gear number menu UI that triggers some people whenever they see that in other games. They saw that in Breakpoint, the players, and they did not like it, to the point that the team was eventually forced to implement a immersive mode, or an immersive versus RPG mode. So if you like the gear score element of the game, you can play that. If you don't, you can switch the other to the immersive mode, which I really wish they implemented here. Stealth games already by design disempower you, and I feel that adding another layer of disempowerment, which is the RPG elements of farming for gear, levels, talents, is a bit too much, in my honest opinion. And honestly, that is it for the video. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. I sincerely apologize for being pedantic. That's just how I am, especially when I am very passionate about games. Let me know your thoughts on my review and your own thoughts on the game as well in the comment section below. Let's try our best to keep it civil, of course, and at the end of the day, games should be one thing: fun. Have a good day, everyone.